Hi, I'm BM Shumack. I'm the author of A Time When Forests Dreamed, and I'm also releasing a new book October 3rd of 2025. This book is called The Book of Flowers, and it is a collection of stories and poetry, all written by me. Now, this book is separated up into two sections. It is poetry and stories, obviously, by the title. And then it's split up a little bit more than that. The stories are just 4 short stories that I've written, and the poetry is split up into 3 subcategories as well. I'm going to talk a little bit later about what has inspired the stories in this collection, because they have been inspired by Pennsylvania, both living here and also just things that I've learned of in history that has happened here, interesting characters that have existed in history, real people, and just what it's like to live in Pennsylvania. That has also inspired the poetry more loosely, just because the poetry is my journal and it's my experiences. First, I wanted to talk a little bit about the covers of these books, both of them actually. I also have one of my test copies of A Time When Forests Dreamed. Oh goodness, the light is not doing its job here, but that is a test copy of A Time When Forests Dreamed. I do have some physical copies, but they are packed away, ready to go to a selling event. Both of these covers were created by me. So we'll talk about the first one first. So the background of this, oh my gosh, this lighting is not doing the lighting thing. This is bark from a tree, which I feel like is pretty obvious, but it is a photo that I took in a park in my hometown area, not in my town, that I just love the idea of, like, the old looking leather bound books that have wear and tear and cracking on them, and I wanted to figure out a way to combine that with nature. And then I started to notice that the way the moss and the lichen and everything grows on tree bark looks very similar to like an old green leather book. And so that is why I use that background, and then just, you know, framing with reference. If you've read the book, you might understand what the little bit of like nods to. Next, the cover of the new book, which is slightly thicker as well, I would like to add. The Book of Flowers. So this is like a canvas background that I have on here. And then we have dried flowers that you can see across it. These dried flowers were all photographed by me, but also dried by me. They are actually flowers from different bouquets that I've saved over the past few years and dried just to keep as a keepsake, and they seem perfect for the cover of this book. Also, you'll see that there are some fainter drawings on there of flowers, and those were also done by me. Surprise, surprise. I am not an amazing artist by any means, but I took pictures of live flowers and overlaid them in an app and digitally drew over them. So it is my art that I just traced to flower, because I'm not great at looking at something and then drawing it. Now the next few clips that you're going to see are going to be filmed in vertical, so they can also be seen on TikTok and Facebook and all of those fun things as well. I do not have the time, and my children do not have the patience to stay quiet long enough for me to film this twice for each of these. So the next few clips are going to be me talking about what inspired each of the short stories in this new book, The Book of Flowers. So the first short story that I'm going to be talking about in this next clip is going to be A Tale from the Old Corner Tavern. The first story I wanted to talk about today from my new book, A Book of Flowers, is A Tale from the Old Corner Tavern. Now, this story was inspired by a historical event that actually happened in and around the town that I live in, Williamsport, Pennsylvania. This is a story of a man named William Hummel, and this man married a widow who was half his age, who had 3 children, and a week after the wedding, all 4 of them. It was the most notorious in the area, possibly even the state at that time. The news of it spread everywhere, and the city rallied together against this man for obvious reasons. And he was found guilty, and he was also the next year for his crimes. This story inspired me in a strange way, where it captured my imagination, and I wanted to remind this area of this woman and her children that we all rallied around when this happened, and remind us that no matter the flaws of the place that we live in, we would do this again. We rally behind women and their children. That is what we do. And it turned into my own form of things. I tend, especially with my short story writing, to lean more into like paranormal situations, but I think it really did work out in a way of not glorifying this horrible man who did horrible things. And I can't wait for you to read it and remember Sarah and her children. Next, I'm going to be talking a little bit about what inspired, or rather, should I say, who inspired the Tower on Lycoming. The next story that I wanted to talk about is the Tower on Lycoming. Now, this story wasn't so much inspired by an event, but by a person and by a place. So this is about a man named John Mason. The actual person, the story that I wrote, is not about a man named John Mason, but the main character in my story is inspired by this man. He built a tower that leaned out over Shikellami's Profile, which is a mountain formation in the area, and he built this tower there to live in, and he had an observation deck, and he was just this very eccentric man. He could be seen ice skating down on the Susquehanna. He just did all of these crazy, wild, eccentric things. Just very much the type of man that I would like to know, because he's probably full of stories. And unfortunately, after his passing, the tower that he had built was knocked down by some vandals that were in the area. But my story was just inspired by this man and this tower, and also by some people that were also in his life, not in the same way that they are in the story, but just, my own artistic interpretation of how these people would be involved with him. Specifically, one woman in my story, her name is Velveteen, but she's inspired by a real author from the area, a female author of the time, who knew John Mason and who wrote a story of this man, and made it so we'll all remember him. And that's kind of what I want to do too. I also wanted to add that this story, while it is a short story and in a separate book, it is set in the same world as A Time When Forest Dreamed. The other stories in this book are not, but this is like a little taste of the universe that is my first novel, and of what will be continuing in future novels in that series. So this one is about a few things, actually, and one of those things is not actually related to Pennsylvania unless you count it being related to me. So it's going to be talking a little bit about something in Pennsylvania that inspired it, but also how I furthered that story and made it my own, and made it relate to me and my family in a little bit of a way. So that story is going to be the 11th card. The third short story that I'd like to talk about is the 11th card. Now, this story is a little bit different than the others because while it is inspired by something that is currently going on in Pennsylvania, I've changed a lot about it, and it's actually not set in Pennsylvania. But this story is actually set in Massachusetts. And that is because it is a story surrounding around witch hunts. And the reason I said it in Massachusetts is because a non-direct, several greats uncle of mine was actually accused of witchcraft during the Salem witch trials. He was an Alden, John Alden Jr. of the Aldens from the Mayflower, and he escaped, and that mysterious somewhat escape, it's hard to find really much information on exactly how he did it, has always intrigued me, and so I wanted to write something on that, but also write something that still had to do with Pennsylvania. And something that has to do with Pennsylvania is the fact that it is still illegal in Pennsylvania to read tarot. And there is a person on TikTok who is currently fighting that because they were targeted by the police of their area for reading tarot in their shop, which is crazy. In this current year that we live in, that's the worst you have to worry about, apparently. So it all kind of was put together to inspire a story about a girl and her experiences when maybe she's not exactly in the time that she thinks she is. Finally, this one's a little bit different because it is just inspired by experiences that I've had both in Pennsylvania and other places, but just my personal experiences with this subject, and that is The House on Summer. The final short story in this book, again, is a little bit different because it is not inspired by a historical event or a current event. It's inspired by my own personal experiences with ghost stories. I know some of you probably don't believe in ghosts, but I figure if you're here, you probably might, and I do kind of lean into that part of it where like, but could we explain it away? Maybe, maybe not, I don't know. But it is inspired by my experiences with what I believe were ghosts, both throughout my life, but most of these did happen within my adult life in Pennsylvania. And it also is just inspired by, you know, a dream home that might exist sometime in the future, hopefully in Pennsylvania, and that is what this main character was wanting and what she thought she had until some things started happening. And it's just a story about, you know, what are you willing to put up with, what aren't you, and what could or couldn't possibly be something beyond the known world. I hope you've enjoyed this video. There was just one little bit I wanted to talk about still before I finish this up, and then we start the countdown until the Book of Flowers comes out October 3rd. So obviously I put a handful of poems into this book, but I have written a decent amount more. I've talked earlier on my social medias about how I've been submitting my poetry to publications, and I did have 2 poems as of the filming of this video be selected to be published in their publications. I have a few more that are still out for review, I guess, that I have not heard back on yet whether or not they will be published. But I wanted to talk a little bit about the fact that I could not include some of these poems, which are actually some of my favorites, of course, that I would like to at some point include them in some way. If there's, interest in it, I could look into releasing a second version of this book, or perhaps writing a second collection. But there are currently, I'm looking at my computer right now, currently 8 poems that I could not include in this book, that I would love to put somewhere. And I'd really like them to be in a book, ideally, but I don't want it that 8 poems is not enough for a book. So if you would like to let me know down in the comments, or if you know me and message me or anything, just what do you think I should do? Should I just release these poems on my social medias, or share it in a book? Thanks for watching. I hope you guys enjoyed this video, and make sure to grab yourself a copy of the Book of Flowers when it comes out October 3rd, 2025. Bye!